There are four building block criteria for anything that can call itself a religion, and it doesn't involve theology. So it doesn't have to be theology based at all. It can just be anything that is a belief system or an ideology of some kind, regardless of what it is. And if something has all four building blocks, then it is it's actually developing into a kind of a religion. And so I took an example of each of the dark elements of the previous civilizations, including today as well, and trying to figure out what the modern emerging religion could be. The first one, and actually the four different building blocks that it has to meet up with are there needs to be leaders who are being worshipped, or a leadership element that is worshipped. There needs to be rules to belong. There needs to be a story about the world that this belief system has, and the belief system also needs to have a vision for the future. And so coming out of Egypt and that dark force of darkness, well, that manifested into a technocratic surveillance kind of culture that is manifesting in today's society. That's the first potential emerging religion. It does have leaders to worship. So, the techno oligarchs are an example of that. Data programmers or anyone associated with the IT field, especially if they're innovative, and even artificial intelligence itself could be considered a prophetic leader that could be worshipped. It does have rules as well, because rules to live by, because everything needs to be digital in order for this culture to exist. And also it is very much about monitoring the people, because it's all about algorithms. It's all about keeping track of everything everyone does, where they are, who they are, what their interests are, what they believe in, and everything. And everything is based on algorithmic control. So it has strong leaders and it has strong rules to belong. I think it also has a pretty strong story, and that is that it says this culture would say that people are chaotic and machines are perfect, and therefore machines should be running the people rather than the other way around. I think that's the kind of a story that it would be telling. And then the vision that it would have to meet that fourth building block is probably something like the world would be a utopian paradise if machines were running everything and the people were just on the receiving end of whatever the machines were running. That would be your techno surveillance kind of culture that would be arising as the dominant one if it were to do that. Now, yes, it does have the four building blocks, but in my view, I think the vision is weak, because the vision says that the vision is really stark. It has no soul. There are going to be people who are going to find it to be boring or lonely or too technical. And I'm not sure that technology has really made our lives easier either. So I'm not sure that it's convincing, that vision either. Yes, Kathy, I do think it's a very scary religion. So I hope I'm not losing anyone. I know that this is going to be kind of complicated for a live, but I'm just wondering, it's probably going to be easier to understand for people who watch it later as a video. But I'm curious about what you think about this potential first religion that is trying to compete for our vote, our consciousness vote. Being something techno surveillance related. Now, Kathy says it's scary, and Cynical Banana says that it's made us lazy, which it really has. And just says it sounds like a devil worshipping religion, a mechanical kind of devil, but anyway, and it has no soul. Yeah, so it kind of, I think, yes, it has strong leadership. And when I say it's strong or weak, I don't mean it's good or bad. I mean, is it a strong contender to become dominant in the future, whether we like it or not? And so I think, it has the strong leadership building block, it has a strong rules building block, it has a strong story, but the vision itself has lots of holes in it because you have to corral the world's population into this vision. And as much as we might be lazy and we want to have a robot vacuum cleaner or whatever it is that, we think is going to be helpful, it also, it's not very egalitarian. So it serves the billionaires' needs more than the average person. And I agree with Ocean Blue. Yuck to that one. Definitely. So let me have a look. I've got a few people. Yeah. And it has no human element, but that I think, and it's a god. You know what? This is a really good point Brian's made. It's a god that we've created. So in a way, it's a bit like being able to look behind the curtain at the Wizard of Oz. We know it's not actually a god because people still have to keep it running and things. And so I'm just not sure that the techno surveillance culture, so the technocratic control, this techno oligarch is going to be, I don't think it is the beast. I don't think it's the beast because the beast, I think, the beast is our new belief system. That's the beast. But I think it might be one of the heads, but I don't think it's strong enough to stand up on its own. The next one was coming out of Assyria, and that was the zeal for death, dark force, and the weaponization of fear. And this would be a religion that is sort of a militaristic, fear-based culture. This one is super terrifying. It's even worse than the techno one because it has strong leadership. Military leaders, politicians, activists, war heroes, people like that, people who are all about the fight and all about expressing fear as well for the rest of us, or imposing fearful, terrifying things. It has very strong rules. The primary rule for this militaristic, fear-based culture as our future belief system would be that war is peace. Just like 1984, they said war is peace. And yeah. And that killing purifies everything and that fear prevails and things like that. And the story that this culture would have would be that violence and chaos keeps everything clean and pure, because as soon as you have dissent, you just eliminate them. And so you purify your environment through war. The vision also is really strong as well, which makes it kind of scary. And that is, military might, peace through strength, kind of, but magnified. Strong nationalism, because you obviously want to be the winner, you want to be the victor, and brutalizing dissent, which means that if you pop your finger up in dissent, they will just destroy you, because there is no room for any kind of difference of opinion. And it's a really terrifying option, but it is really strong when it comes to the religious building blocks. And so I would like to know what you have to think about that one. That's the second potential culture moving forward, that militaristic, fear-based culture. Yeah, a little bit, Dana, a little bit. And war doesn't have winners, but there's always going to be enough people to be the pawns that you just throw out there. The ones who don't physically engage are doing fine, if they're just pushing a button or ordering everyone else to go out and die. And this, Andrea, this is a good question about who would be the hierarchy. I think the leaders really would be nations leaders, military leaders, the favored politicians, the ones that are pro-war, activists, because it's all about fear and fighting, and then the war heroes, I guess the ones that would be, you'd have someone to recognize because they've come back and they've been victorious. They killed 100 people or 1,000 people, or they saved a comrade's life, or that kind of thing. But I think it would be a very violent, very chaotic, very fear-based culture, because that would be the whole point. Yeah, well, I think, Colleen, it is a scary one, and at the moment, having looked at those first two, I think it's the only one that can stand up by itself. That doesn't mean just for anyone who's showing up a minute ago. That's not. I'm not saying it's good. I'm looking at it in terms of being weak or strong, based on whether it has those four building blocks that make up a religion, and it looks like it would be a strong contender to fight off anything else, because it would attack anything that it didn't agree with as well. So the third one comes from Babylon, and that is the culture of lust and indulgence and temptation, which sounds nice, on the surface. But the leaders, so we'll have a look at the first building block. The first building block is leaders. Does it have strong leaders to worship? Well, the kinds of leaders that this culture would have would be, cults of personality, celebrities, people who make promises about, wonderful things that happen in the future or that are just about to come, or that they're going to make happen for you, and lifestyle gurus. Maybe the winners of MasterChef or something could be leaders as well, because it's all about indulgence and enjoyment and luxury and things like that. And so anyone who offers the promise of that or appears to possess that would be the one to worship. So it has that kind of leadership quality. The rules for belonging would be beauty and luxury and excess. So you'd have to be highly indulgent to belong. You'd have to believe in indulgence. You'd maybe, if you were truly, very beautiful, or had beautiful stuff, or had a lot of stuff, or were covered in gold or something like that. This very superficial kind of rules for engagement. The story around this culture would be that life is short and it needs to be expressed and enjoyed now, that kind of thing. So, instant gratification kind of thing. And then the vision would be all about consumerism and hedonism and things like that. Honestly, I think, I don't know about the rest of you. When I looked at this particular possibility for to whether it's a strong contender, I think it's really weak. Because yes, it can, you can have lots of things dangled in front of you, but overall it's very divisive, because unless you fit into this category of being beautiful and indulgent and excessive and slathered in all kinds of gold and diamonds, you're not going to fit in, which means that I think it's going to split the world into a very small pocket of people who meet the criteria, and then the rest of the world who don't. So you'll either be worthy or not worthy, rich or not rich, entitled or not entitled, have or have nots and things. And I just don't think it's workable. So I think that this particular Babylonian religion doesn't have any strength at all. I agree, Cynical Banana. It's so sad that we celebrate and pay celebrities and athletes more than we do teachers, healthcare workers, and those who really make a difference and deserve. Yes, I agree. And so I don't think that one's even worth dwelling on. So this third one, no. So far, I think the strongest contender is the militaristic, fear-based culture. So let's move on to the fourth one. This one comes from Medo-Persia, and it is the one that caters to desire, which is not desire as in desire for luxury or an appetite or sex or anything like that. It's desire, which I think is the ancient way of describing your fundamental need, like the need for air and the need for food and the need for shelter and the need for safety. I think that's what they mean by desire. And this is where the system starts to develop into a bureaucracy. And so it would be a bureaucracy-based culture to make people feel safe so that their desire for safety is satisfied. The 4 building blocks. Well, the leadership building block, I guess that the leaders to worship would be the legal system, judges, international treaty makers, or something that is very organized. The rules would be that there'd have to be strict adherence to codes of conduct and laws. Maybe a single currency would be part of it as well. And the populations would be homogenized because they would all have to fit into the rules. And so I think it wouldn't really allow for very much individuality or expression. The story for this particular religion would be that conflict comes from anything that doesn't fit the rules. And then the vision sounds positive. It's about being just and fair and having a really stable global order. Very legalistic, yes, Jackie. And everyone would be equal in this bureaucracy-based culture because the whole point of it is to be just and fair and to have very strict rules. And that immediately, that vision, I think, it falls apart with the vision, because if everyone is equal, then who's going to lead? Who's going to be the leader of a system where everybody is equal? Because, will the rich give up their privilege in order to become equal to everyone else? No. And so I think that it has about as much chance of being the next culture or the next religion as the lust indulgence one from Babylon. So I think Medo-Persia and Babylon are both out. The next one is, well, actually, I'll see what you guys have to say before I do that. And there you go. There you go. How utterly boring life would be if we were all the same. Agreed 100%. So the next one is the one coming from Greece, which is the kingdom of the flesh. No, it's not. It's the wisdom of the flesh. The wisdom of the flesh. That's the dark power that the Gnostics identified. And this is the culture that I would call the path of perfection culture. So the leaders would be people like philosophers, scientists, thought leaders, people who connect the dots on things. They may also be self-improvement gurus or something, people who, train the perfect body or raise the perfect child, or reaching, traveling, who appear to be traveling up the steps towards some kind of perfection, whether it's intellectual or physical or something, perfection. The rules would be commitment to self-improvement, mastering the mind and mastering the physical body. So bodybuilders and philosophers in the same room, that kind of a thing. And the story would be that anyone who doesn't meet the ideal is basically failing, and that failing is the root of suffering. So, when you set your sights really high, when perfectionism, thank you, Jackie, when perfectionism is your goal for a culture, for a religion, that anyone who isn't perfect, who doesn't reach that standard, is failing. And so I think that makes it a very, mastering yourself is what's going to save you. That's your salvation, is the mastery of the self. I think that's going to basically be the order of the day with this particular potential religion. So their vision would be the perfected human. So visually and intellectually perfected. And it is a strong vision. And it sounds really ideal because it creates a perfect person, which can't be a bad thing. Except what about the people who failed to meet those very high expectations? And so it creates a two-class system. And it's unattainable for most people, which means that the likelihood of it being sustained, there you go, unattainable, Dana, we share a brain. Yeah, it's just unattainable, which means that is also a weak one. So far, we've gone through 5 of the emerging religions that are potentially competing as heads of the beast for our willing or unwilling conscious vote. And the strongest one so far is the militaristic, fear-based religion, with a close second coming out of technology, that technological surveillance. Now, they appear to be the strongest, but the fear-based one is the strongest so far. We then move into the Rome element, where this is where everything becomes institutionalized. And this is the state-run culture, which the Gnostics refer to as the kingdom of the flesh. And this is a culture or a religion that incorporates everything that has already been learned. So it takes all of the different, it's almost a bit like a hybrid, but it turns it into an institution that gets the best of everything. And the leaders would probably be, because it's state-run, it's a state-run culture, there probably would be a federal central leadership structure right at the center, which means maybe like a central king or a central president or something, and everything else is secondary. So whatever the center says goes. So federal or central government would be the worshipped leaders, and there would be a central political entity as well, which means that the different political viewpoints probably wouldn't be permitted. You'd have to have a central, static state view, that kind of a thing. The rules would be things like civil rituals, loyalty to national symbols, strong nationalism, zero dissent from the central ideals and things like that. The story would be that, the nation or the state is divine, and that it is the chosen vessel, and that it can't do any wrong, that kind of thing. Imagine a little bit like the way that authoritarians run their countries, where the authoritarian is the final word on everything, and they are the state. They create a state-run culture that's based on whatever they want at the moment, and there would have to be an unwavering patriotism, and that unwavering patriotism is the path towards salvation. Now, the vision is actually pretty strong, because the vision is that this is a strong entity that's going to protect the people, and everyone sits within the banner of this entity, and that the entity, the state, is God, kind of thing. It has very deep emotional and cultural roots. So once people are in there and they're patriotic, then they're unwavering in their loyalty, because there's no other option. There'd be strong national pride. There wouldn't be much in the way of internal division or anything, because everyone would be measured against whether they are how close to the center they are, and if they're not close enough, then they don't count. But there's no room for change at all, so everything would be very, very much stay the same, and there's no ability to have any political discourse of any kind. So you couldn't have political parties or anything, because they'd have nothing to say. They can't challenge anything, and so there's no point having them. And also, this kind of a religion or culture would also it wouldn't have any relationship with anything outside of itself, which means there'd be no global reach. So it would just be isolated, which means that geographically Earth is pretty big. I'm not sure if it's possible to have one state ideal that spans the entire world, which means that it would just be a bunch of authoritarian geographic locations that don't communicate with each other. They don't do trade. They don't share populations, nothing. They don't share information. And so I'm not sure that kind of lets it down, the fact that it would become so internalized that I'm not sure that it could operate. Yeah, it's potentially not sustainable. You're finding all my best words, Jackie. Thank you. So, what do you think about that? Um, yeah, actually, technology is being pushed, but I don't think it can stand up on its own. And it might be worthwhile talking about that. Yeah, a bit like North Korea. Yeah, that's right. The state-run culture, that religion would be a bit like North Korea. So the last one is the culture of today, which is definitely a hybrid culture. Okay, so leadership would be all kinds of things. You'd have technology-based leadership, you'd have indulgence kind of leadership, you'd have charismatic leadership, you'd have militaristic leadership. Nothing's fixed. So, leaders come and go and they have all different types of forms. And we might be worshipping a beautiful, charismatic person tomorrow. And then the next day, someone's come up with a new technological innovation and we're worshipping them. It could be that kind of a thing. I think that I've made an assumption that the kind of theology that exists now is dying out, and the beast represents what is going to replace it. And the heads of the beast are the competing ideologies or the competing frameworks that are all trying to be a piece of the beast, all trying to be part of the future. And which one is going to win? Well, this hybrid one of today kind of has strong building blocks, because yes, you've got all different types of leadership, so people can there you go, people can worship their flavor of the week, right? And there's room for someone to worship somebody somewhere regardless of what it is, and that is kind of what's happening today. The rules are for belonging to this religion would be pretty easygoing, and that is that there's an acceptance there that the world has a unified global identity that is made up of lots of different things in a very blended kind of belief system. So a little bit of everything goes into play, which I think is already the case, because you've got people who believe in UFOs and that we were created by aliens, and you've got people who believe in the scientific human origin stories. You've got those that believe that God created the earth and everything in it in 7 days, and you've got all kinds of things, and it's all kind of part of today's world. The story of this today's sort of hybrid culture is that humanity's divisions, what keeps us apart, is the cause for suffering. So our divisions are what causing us to suffer, and unity is our salvation. And also oversight ensures compliance as well, because today's hybrid culture includes that bit of technology in it. So I was thinking about the fact that there's a little bit of everything. And so the story of this religion of today is that we need to be unified, we can't be divided, and we need a bit of technology to oversee us to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that kind of thing. And the vision would be what we're aspiring for in the future, which is a single harmonized civilization under a shared, monitored kind of system of truth. I personally think that the hybrid culture of today is strong on all of the building blocks. It's adaptable because it can absorb new ideas as our perspectives kind of change, but it's just the same as today.